Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Transformative Pedagogy podcast, where we'll be cultivating equity in education. I'm your host, Laura Paz Huerta, and for today's episode, we're going to dive into the topic of social justice education, especially in the context of K through 12 schools here in California, and why it matters. We're going to explore what social justice education really means and why it's so important to us all and how it can transform learning environments to be more inclusive, equitable, and empowering for all of our students. I'm a current teacher in the K 12 system myself, having currently teaching Spanish and ELD, but I've also taught adult education in juvenile health centers in the Central Valley. So I've seen firsthand how these concepts come to life in the classrooms, and it's magical when you see the students dialoguing amongst themselves and truly get into these discussions when given the opportunity. Social justice education isn't just a theoretical framework, it's an approach, a different kind of approach to teaching and learning. Including social justice topics in your curriculum has positively impacted my students on multiple levels when I've done it. It's helped them critically analyze the world around them, the community that they're in. It's helped them understand the journey of others and have more empathy as well. I remember a truly life changing moment in my classroom, which solidified for me creating this podcast. It started out as a simple discussion, warm up actually, in regards to immigration. For background, I am located in the Central Valley, in which the driving labor force is agriculture. And our communities are made up of individuals and families immigrating to California and working the seasons and bringing food to our tables. It was supposed to be a small 3-minute discussion about immigration, privilege, and the systemic barriers with my students, which turned into a 20-minute discussion. It brought about connections to their families, culture, our society as a whole. And I was a witness to these students writing, dialoguing, understanding, and listening to one another and their experiences. And that for me as an educator was truly a moment in which I played a role in guiding my students towards awareness and action in their communities. It was through that experience that this podcast became an idea. And from that idea, it became this first episode. This audio journey isn't only for me to share my stories about my classroom and what I've learned, but it's also an opportunity for you, my listeners out there, who want to be that change in your classroom, who want to be that change in schools, in your schools, in other schools, and in your communities. This podcast, I hope, will give you that nudge to explore, reflect, and engage the principles of equity and inclusion, and see how it transforms you as a person, an educator, and community member. My experience in the classroom has equipped me with firsthand knowledge of the educational dynamics, the diverse needs of students, and the challenges inherent in promoting inclusivity and equity. And trust me, I know it's not easy, especially in a system that wasn't and unfortunately still isn't designed with social justice in mind. Although we're getting there, we're trying. But that's why I created this podcast, to promote the positive impact that social justice education has in our schools, to raise awareness and to inspire action through sharing both my own experiences and the stories of others who have successfully integrated social justice principles into their teachings. I hope to equip you with the tools to do the same. The beauty of social justice education is that it's not a one size fits all approach. It's adaptable, evolving, and deeply rooted in the lived experiences of both educators and students. So, as you embark on this podcast journey with me, I want you to keep an open mind. Reflect on your own experiences. Reflect on each and every one of these episodes. And whether you've already started incorporating these topics into your teaching or this is your first exposure to this concept, I'm excited for you to explore how embracing equity can create more inclusive and transformative learning environments, and how the relationships with your students will blossom in ways you might not have imagined. So, before we get into today's content, today's episode, I want you to take a moment to acknowledge that social justice education is not without its challenges, right? We're educators. We understand that what we do always, there's some obstacle, some hurdle, but we take it in stride. As educators, we face institutional resistance or pushback from those who are uncomfortable with these conversations or refuse to acknowledge that there's anything wrong with the systems in place. But I want to remind you that discomfort is part of growth. Change, especially meaningful change, does not come easy. It's going to require patience from us. It's going to require persistence and courage. So I encourage you to approach this podcast with courage, knowing that the work you're doing is not just valuable, but essential to creating a more just and equitable world for your students. All right, so let's start by answering the most fundamental question. What is social justice education? Well, social justice education is the process of teaching students to be aware of social inequalities and the ways in which they affect various groups in our society. It emphasizes fairness, equity, and critical thinking. It's about helping students understand the structures of oppression, privilege, and systemic barriers that shape their experiences and those of others. Now, I know that sounds like a lot to unpack, especially when we're already so focused on curriculum standards and test scores and what admin needs of us. But here's the thing. Social justice education isn't separate from what we're already doing in the classroom. It's woven in the very fabric of how we teach, how we're creating this learning environment where every student feels seen, valued. Now, there are some very important key components of social justice education. We have critical thinking about power and inequality, and making sure that we're encouraging students to question and analyze the world around them. I take that as real world application. So, who holds power in our society? How does that power affect different groups and our communities? And how can we as individuals challenge those power structures? Of course, in a safe manner. There's also understanding and addressing bias and stereotypes. We all have biases, whether we're aware of them or not. And social justice education involves recognizing and confronting those biases, both within ourselves and in the materials we teach. Another component is advocating for equity and inclusion. This is where the real change is happening, or where it happens. It's not enough to simply recognize these injustices. Anybody could do that. But we have to actively work to dismantle it. That means advocating for policies and practices that promote fairness both in our classrooms and beyond. And finally, there's empowering educators and students to be agents of change. Ultimately, social justice education is about empowerment. It's about giving students the tools and the confidence to stand up for what's right and to create the kind of world that they want to live in. Overall, social justice education is about more than just talking about diversity or simply making it seem as if it's just activism. It's about critical examination of society's structures, from historical contexts to modern day systems. It's also about providing educators with the tools to advocate for justice and equity, and more importantly, to implement change in the classroom. So, why is social justice education even essential in K through 12 schools? Well, let's get into it. We are examining the state of California, and California is one of the most diverse states in the US. Our classrooms are filled with students from a variety of racial, ethnic, cultural, and socioeconomic backgrounds. So it is important to understand and acknowledge that this diversity is a strength in our state and in our country. And it also comes with its challenges, though. Without proper guidance and understanding that diversity itself is not the issue, but rather the systemic issues and biases that exist, right, in how diversity is managed or understood. Additionally, the failure to address these systemic biases, inequality, and the deficit views of diversity can unintentionally lead to prejudice and marginalization within our educational system here, not only in California, but in the US as well. So, with that being said, um, let's dive into it. We've all heard about the achievement gap. So, for those of you who haven't, the achievement gap is the disparity in academic performance between students from different backgrounds, particularly along racial and socioeconomic lines. So, social justice education truly helps us understand that this gap isn't about an individual student and their performance, but rather more of a symptom, right, of deeper systemic issues that affect opportunities for our students. If we get into it, Gloria Ladson Billings points out um, it's more accurately an opportunity gap, right? Highlighting the inequitable distribution of resources and opportunities that hinder student success. Uh, this reference from Latson Billings shifts in framing the issue and drawing attention to that underlying systemic inequality that is found within our classrooms. So, incorporating social justice education truly allows teachers to create a more inclusive classroom or create, in general, more inclusive classrooms. When students feel seen and heard and when their experiences are validated, they are more likely to engage and excel in the lessons being taught. There's also a trust that is being established between student and teacher, and that understanding that their teacher is there and aware that there is a problem, and they are trying their best for the student to succeed regardless. So, what does this mean exactly? This means being intentional about representing those diverse perspectives, histories, and voices in our curriculum, and challenging the Eurocentric or mainstream narratives that have dominated our textbooks for decades. So, what does social justice education actually look like in practice? We can theorize how it can look like and how we can implement it. But in our reality, how does it look like when it's actually being practiced within our schools, within our classrooms? It involves things like culturally relevant pedagogy, teaching that connects to students' cultural experiences, project based learning that focuses on solving those real world social issues like climate change, economic inequality, or immigration, topics that truly impact their daily lives. And also implementing critical discussion about current events, emphasizing on media literacy and understanding bias. I think a great example is, my state of California here, pushing for ethnic studies. And legislation has passed that starting the 2025 school year, ethnic studies will be a required course for high school students. I know that this curriculum will help students learn about the histories, culture, and contributions of historically marginalized communities in the US and in our state. And it's a perfect example of social justice education in action, teaching our students to appreciate diversity while critically examining social and historical power structures. So, what kind of benefits can we see coming from social justice education? Well, there's research that shows that when students are exposed to social justice education, they develop stronger empathy and they're better equipped to understand perspectives different from their own. This truly helps reduce bias and prejudice, and it's also preparing them to navigate all the diverse communities and cultures that are out there in the world. Social justice education also empowers teachers, fellow educators, to think critically about their society and become active participants in creating change. Whether it's through advocating for policies at schools, organizing community events, or simply speaking up when witnessing injustices. Educators who understand social justice are more likely to take action and advocate for their students. We have Paulo Freire, um, author of Pedagogy of the Oppressed, who states that one of the foundational texts for social justice education is that education should be a tool for liberation, empowering not only teachers but students as well to recognize and challenge systems of oppression. Teachers trained in this tradition are often more motivated to engage in advocacy and community leadership. There are studies that show that teachers receive training or who have received training in critical pedagogy and social justice frameworks report greater confidence in addressing issues of inequity and organizing for change within their schools. Research done by the American Educational Research Association suggests that those same teachers who engage in social justice training are more likely to participate in collective action such as advocating for equitable school policies, fair discipline practices, equitable funding, organizing community outreach efforts to support marginalized families, and joining or initiating teacher-led movements aimed at social and educational reform. We have studies of over 200 teachers in a social justice program in which 80% reported that they had taken some form of action, whether it was advocating for students, organizing events, or engaging in policy advocacy within 2 years of completing their training for social justice education. And then we have the Center for American Progress reporting that teachers who are trained in social justice education often become key advocates for changing school practice, such as pushing for restorative justice programs instead of punitive discipline actions or policies. This in turn lets us know that in schools where teachers actively engaged in social justice initiatives, there was a 15 to 20% reduction in suspension rates and improved student-teacher relationships. Now, there's also evidence of improvement of academic outcomes. Students who feel included and represented in the curriculum perform better academically. When schools are responsive to students' identities and backgrounds, students are more motivated to succeed. Researchers such as Geneva Gay and Gloria Ladson Billings, who I've mentioned earlier, have emphasized how this has improved academic outcomes by affirming students' cultural backgrounds and integrating them into learning experiences. These are all studies showing us that when students feel respected and represented, they're engaging more fully with learning the material and being present in the classroom. The National Education Association and the American Psychological Association have also found that inclusive curriculums help students feel a sense of belonging, which in turn motivates them to succeed. The Learning Policy Institute found that students in culturally responsive environments were more likely to complete assignments, participate in class, and improve their grades. There was research done in US school systems that show that culturally relevant pedagogy can narrow the achievement gap between minority and majority students. There was a Stanford Graduate School of Education study done that found that ethnic studies courses increased attendance by 21% and improved the GPAs of those students by 1.4 grade points in the high school. There was another study or research done from the New York City Department of Education showing that schools with culturally responsive teaching had higher overall student performance and graduation rates. particularly for our students of color. Now, all these studies, all this data, all this research just shows and underlines the positive academic and psychological outcomes of inclusive, identity affirming education brought about social justice education. So, incorporating social justice education into K through 12 schools isn't just a trend. It's a necessary step towards building a more equitable and just classroom, community, society. When we think about the future of education here in California, we're looking at more than just test scores, new technologies, or the next wave of pedagogical approaches. What we're really talking about is the future of our students, their ability to navigate and shape a world that is increasingly diverse, interconnected, and complex. Social justice education is essential to preparing our students for that world. As educators, administrators, and community members, we have a profound responsibility. Our classrooms must reflect the diversity, complexity, and richness of the world that we live in. But it's not just about recognizing diversity. It's about creating environments where students can thrive regardless of their background. This is where social justice education becomes crucial and necessary. It's about ensuring that all students, no matter their race, gender, socioeconomic status, ability, or background, feel valued and empowered. Imagine a future where every child in California grows up understanding not only their rights, but also their responsibilities towards their peers, their communities, and the world. Imagine classrooms where conversations about equity, inclusion, and fairness are as common as math and science lessons, where students learn to question systems of power and oppression while also being equipped with tools to create positive change. This isn't a far off deal, it's something we can work towards today. And yeah, let's be honest, achieving this vision won't happen overnight, it won't happen in a week. It will take time. It requires a collective effort from all of us in the educational community: teachers, administrators, parents, and students themselves. It's going to require us to question the status quo, to ask those tough questions about why certain groups of students have historically been marginalized, and how we can change that, improve our schools, improve our classrooms, improve our communities. It means challenging the way we've always done things, even if it's uncomfortable. Again, real growth comes from discomfort. One way we can begin to make this shift is rethinking the curriculum. Social justice education calls for a curriculum that doesn't just add diverse voices as an afterthought, but one that centers them. This involves teaching history from multiple perspectives, integrating literature that reflects a range of experiences, and encouraging critical conversations about current events. It's about creating a curriculum that reflects the real world, not just a small portion of it. It's one that helps students understand the historical and systemic factors that have shaped the society they live in and gives them the tools to change it. However, it doesn't just stop at the curriculum. The future of education in California also depends on the way we approach pedagogy. How are we teaching? How are we fostering environments where students feel safe to express their identities and opinions? Are we encouraging critical thinking, collaboration, and problem solving around real world issues? Social justice education requires a shift in how we teach, moving beyond simply transferring knowledge to empowering students to use that knowledge to address injustices and inequalities they see in the world. We shouldn't forget that this is a collaborative effort. Teachers cannot do it alone. Administrators need to support teachers with professional development opportunities that help them understand how to integrate social justice into their classrooms. School districts must prioritize policies that promote equity and inclusion, ensuring that all students have access to high quality education, regardless of where they come from or what resources they have available to them. So how can you support social justice education? You might be wondering, individually, what can I do? Well, whether you're a teacher, parent, or community leader, there are so many ways you can contribute to this approach. You can advocate for inclusive curriculum. Whether you're a teacher advocating within your school, a parent speaking to your child's school board, or a community member pushing for change in your local district, advocating for an inclusive curriculum is a powerful step, an important one. Challenge schools to include diverse voices, perspectives, and experiences in every subject area. Push for curriculum changes that not only teach students about the historical injustices faced by marginalized groups, but also celebrate their contributions and resilience. Support teachers with resources. Teachers are often on the front line of social justice education. And to be honest, we need the right resources to be effective. This could mean advocating for better funding for schools, particularly those in underserved communities. Or it could mean donating time, money, or supplies to help teachers bring social justice lessons into their classrooms. Additionally, teachers themselves can seek out resources like professional developments, books, and lesson plans that focus on social justice and equity. As educators, we can help create a safe and supportive space. So whether we're in a school, at home, or the community, it's important to create spaces where students feel safe and encouraged to explore these important issues. This means being open to difficult conversations about race, gender, and inequality. It means encouraging students to speak up, ask questions, and challenge assumptions. It means fostering a culture of respect and inclusion where every student feels valued, seen, and heard. Promoting dialogue and reflections. Social justice education is not about imposing a particular set of beliefs on students. That's not what it's all about. It's about promoting dialogue, encouraging critical thinking, and fostering reflection. We can all support this process by engaging in discussions with students, teachers, community members. We can strive towards asking thoughtful questions, listening to different perspectives, and reflecting on our own beliefs and biases. And truly, it's through this process of dialogue and reflection that real learning and growth happens. Something important I want to focus on is engagement with the community. Social justice education doesn't happen in isolation on its own. It's part of a broader movement towards equity and justice in society. So, engaging with the community to support initiatives that promote social justice, whether, again, advocating for policies that address income inequality, supporting local organizations that fight for racial justice, or volunteering at a community center that serves underrepresented populations. By connecting the work in education to the broader movement for social justice, one can amplify the impact. And as we move forward, let's remember that social justice education is about empowerment. It's about empowering students to see themselves as change makers, as community leaders and individuals who have the ability and the responsibility to create a more just world. It's about empowering teachers to step outside of their comfort zone, to challenge the traditional way of doing things, and to embrace new approaches that prioritize equity and inclusion. And it's about empowering communities to come together in support of this critical work. So we've come to the end of our first episode. I want to thank everyone for joining me today. I hope today's episode has given you some new insights into what social justice education truly is and why it's so essential and important to the future of not only of the education of our California students, but of all the students. I also hope that you're feeling inspired to take action, whether it's advocating for curriculum changes, supporting teachers, or simply starting a conversation in your school community. Thank you again for joining me today on today's episode, and I hope to be joined by you on the next one. Don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions, thoughts, or ideas. I'd love to engage in discussion and dialogue with my listeners out there. And just remember, together we can build a future where every student has the opportunity to learn in an inclusive, equitable, and just environment. So this episode was made possible by the book Teaching for Diversity and Social Justice by Adams, Bell, and Griffin, which provides a foundational framework for social justice education, outlining key concepts such as equality, inclusion, and the role of power in education. It's widely used in educational settings to support teachers in integrating social justice into their curricula. The Ethnic Studies module curriculum created by the California Department of Education, in which it is the official resource for California's Ethnic Studies curriculum, which will become a high school graduation requirement starting in the 2025-2026 school year. The model curriculum is designed to promote critical thinking about identity, race, and historical inequities. The research journal toward a theory of cultural relevant pedagogy, in which Gloria Ladson Billings' work on culturally relevant pedagogy is a cornerstone of social justice education. Her research outlines how teachers can better connect with students from diverse backgrounds through meaningful, culturally responsive teaching. I'd like to mention Sonia Nieto's book, The Light in Their Eyes, Creating Multicultural Learning Communities, published in 2010. Nieto emphasizes the importance of multicultural education, highlighting how it fosters inclusion and understanding in K through 12 settings. She advocates for teachers to create learning communities where every student feels valued and empowered. Her work serves as a foundational resource for anyone interested in the connection between multiculturalism and social justice in the classroom. Another key piece of literature is Christine Sleeter's 2011 research review, The Academic and Social Value of Ethnic Studies, which was published by the National Education Association. Sleeter demonstrates the positive impacts that ethnic studies programs have on students' academic success and social development. Her research makes a compelling case for why ethnic studies should be a staple in K through 12 education, showing how these programs enrich students' learning experiences and equip them with critical thinking skills. In line with this push for ethnic studies in education is Assembly Bill 1460, passed by the California State Legislature in 2020. This law mandates that all California State University students take an ethnic studies course as part of their graduation requirements. It's a significant milestone that reinforces the state's commitment to integrating social justice education into higher education and reflects broader trends to bring these principles into K through 12 schooling as well. Another scholar whose work has deeply informed the conversation around social justice education is James Bank. In his 2004 article, Teaching for Social Justice, Diversity, and Citizenship in a Global World, Banks explores how we can integrate social justice into citizenship education, preparing students to be active, thoughtful participants in a global society. His insight into the connections between diversity, justice, and global citizenship have been instrumental in shaping modern approaches to teaching these critical subjects. I also want to highlight an important study by J. Garcia and E. Mayorga titled Ethnic Studies as Pedagogical Practices, Storing as Critical Praxis in K through 12 Education, published in 2020 in the Journal of Equity in Education. Their work explores how ethnic studies offers students a space to critically examine their own identities and narratives within the context of broader social inequalities. This pedagogical approach is key in empowering students to reflect on their personal experiences while understanding systemic issues that shape their lives. Additionally, the Southern Poverty Law Center's Teaching Tolerance, Social Justice Standards is a fantastic resource for K through 12 educators. Published in 2019, this framework provides tools for teachers to create anti-bias classrooms that address issues of inequality, diversity, and justice. These standards are widely used to guide educators in creating inclusive learning environments that promote social justice. Finally, I have to mention Geneva Gay's work, Culturally Responsive Teaching, Theory, Research, and Practice, published in 2018. Gay provides a theoretical framework for culturally responsive teaching, which is central to social justice education. Her research delves into how educators can engage students from diverse backgrounds in meaningful and effective ways, ensuring that every student's voice and experience is acknowledged in the learning process. These sources have deeply informed my approach to social justice education and have played part in today's episode. And I encourage you to explore them further if you're interested in diving deeper into these important topics. Together, they offer a wealth of knowledge and practical strategies that can help all of us integrate social justice into our teaching practices. Thank you.